Andy Copping. I'm the president of UK Touring of Live Nation UK. I became a part of the Live Nation team about 14 years ago. It was when the company was called Clear Channel, and they'd headhunted me from. I worked at a venue in Nottingham, where I was the director, promoter, just everything there. And I was quite a big fish in a small pond in Nottingham. And Clear Channel came in for me and wanted me to become a kind of a national promoter, as opposed to what I'd been doing previously, which was a regional promoter for an independent company. So that happened about 15 years ago, and here I am today. That was probably, when I was in Nottingham and I felt that I'd got something changed and that it became like a proper job. I was originally there. I was just DJing because the venue also had a club night, and I was DJing at the club night. But I also had like what my parents would call like a proper job. I was in marketing and advertising for newspapers back in my hometown in Lincoln, and then every Friday night I would go over and be a DJ in Nottingham. And the venue at the time, they were getting bands coming through, and I was advising them what bands that they should book. Oh, this band's going down really, really well on the club night. I think if you book them to play here, it will sell a lot of tickets. And I was doing that for about 18 months, and then they just said, look, do you want to come and work here full time and be the venue booker and the venue promoter? I mean, that was like the dream job for me, because suddenly I could give up my day job, which I hated, and I never really had a flair for it, to go and do something that I totally loved. I lived and breathed, and still do, live and breathe music and finding new bands and being a fan of them. But having the opportunity to work with them on a regular basis was like, if I was at school thinking I was going to be that guy, I would never ever have thought that would happen. So, I was lucky enough to be in a position that I had the chance to do that. It's kind of tough sometimes not to get over cynical about the job as such. But what I do every time, if things are getting tough, I go back to thinking about when I wasn't in this industry, that if I had ever had the opportunity, I would have grabbed it with both hands, which is what I did. So being able to work with like household names, it's a big deal. Being able to tell your family and your friends that, oh, I was working with David Bowie today, or you'd be working. I remember when we first did Pearl Jam and we first did Rage Against the Machine, when Pearl Jam, I booked them into a 300 capacity room in Nottingham, and same with Rage Against the Machine, and you knew something was happening with those bands, and it just obviously massively exploded. I had an inkling that something positive was going to happen, because the record labels had really been pushing both those acts, even though it was early days, particularly for that scene with Pearl Jam and Nirvana too, that you just felt, you could really feel there was a big change in the music scene at the time, and it was good to feel that you were part of that. I remember when we did Nirvana in Nottingham, it had not been long after the Nevermind album had come out, and obviously Smells Like Teen Spirit was a huge, huge song. And everything that was just going on around that band at the time was incredible. Funnily enough, Russell Warby, the agent of Nirvana, and he's still the agent of, or is the agent of Foo Fighters and many other bands. He'd got a strong connection in Nottingham because he'd been to the university there, and it was just an incredible time. So feeling that you're part of that, putting those kind of shows on and those bands going on to sort of greater heights, it's a really incredible feeling. I remember David Bowie when he came into and played at Rock City, that he was such a gentleman with everybody. I mean, this was he was going out and he was playing small clubs. He wanted to do like serious underplay. This guy could sell out stadiums, no problems, but he wanted to go back to clubs, and he got a new record out. And he just came and he chatted to everybody. He was such a gentleman. I remember thinking, this guy is a superstar, but he seemed totally unaffected about what his status was. He was just a really, really nice, kind human being. I remember like even the cleaners at the venue, they were just gobsmacked that David Bowie would take time just to say hello to him, and get a bit emotional actually, because obviously in passing away earlier this year. But when you look back at that and you're thinking, you know what, that guy had everything, but it never changed him as a human being. And I mean, that's something that I'll never forget. Just, you know, somebody like that coming into the venue and just being a really cool person. In terms of mentors, when I first started, a lot of it, I was very driven, so I was just doing it myself. When I joined Clear Channel, you know, the guy that was running at the time, Stuart Galbraith, he was the one who basically gave me the opportunity, and the idea of Download Festival was his idea. There's no question about that. I mean, Stuart was a big mentor for me in the early days when I became a national promoter. I mean, he saw something in me that probably other people didn't, and actually gave me the opportunity of getting into the business. When I first started, and we had like a digital department, which was one guy. And that guy's actually gone on and he's running Ticketmaster now, which is Mark Jovich. And I used to remember thinking, what does Mark do? What is this digital stuff? And he was like a total whiz about everything. And we'd seen the digital department grow over the years. And just particularly with the social networks as well, with the way that you can connect directly with fans nowadays. You don't have to spend potloads of money on great big 60x40 posters and full page ads in newspapers and all that stuff, which that's all you had back in the day. It's great having that now, and you know, handbills at gigs and everything else, but the way that you spend your marketing money now compared to what it was just a handful of years ago, particularly when I started, say, 15 years ago at Clear Channel and into Live Nation, is very, very different. A lot of new bands get it and understand it. A lot of the old bands and some of the older agents don't. They're still stuck a little bit in the dark ages and still want to see huge posters and everywhere, and they don't understand the digital side. But you know, that's moved. It's moving along, and everybody's starting to get an angle on it. But it's so important, and that, I would say without a doubt, has been the biggest change in the business. One of the main purposes for me joining Clear Channel was they wanted to relaunch a festival at Donington Park. Right throughout the 80s and a big part of the 90s, they'd had the festival there, Monsters of Rock, which was huge. And the idea was that they were going to, they wanted to relaunch a festival at Donington Park. They wanted to bring it into the modern age, because basically what had happened with Monsters of Rock, although it was hugely popular at the time, it never was able to evolve. Like the name of the festival and the bands that they'd originally had on there had made it kind of a classic rock event. And certainly at the early part of the 90s, bands like Faith No More, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Rage Against the Machine, all those that were starting to break through and be big acts, wouldn't play the festival because they didn't want to be associated with, you know, the White Snakes and the the Def Leppards and the Guns N' Roses and all of that kind of those classic rock bands that played. So towards the end of the 90s, that festival had kind of faded out. I'd done, as I talked earlier, I'd done the Green Day event in Nottingham, so they could say I'd got some kind of flair of putting an event on. So it kind of brought me in to help them build this new event, which we ended up calling Download. And we started off as a 2-day, 2 stages, just over three days camping. And we've seen it grow now into like a 5-stage, 3 days of music, 5-6 days worth of camping, to probably one of the biggest individual festivals in the world. I mean, people don't realise that we do up to 100,000 people at Download Festival, and there's a lot of other festivals out there that get a lot more publicity than us, a bit more mainstream, that don't even do a third of the amount of tickets that we do. But you know, it is what it is, and you know, being able to establish that event as we have over the years has really made me feel super proud of what I do. And it's a big part of what I do on a day-to-day basis, even though I've got a huge portfolio of acts. But that was a big, that was a big turning point where I felt once we got that festival off the ground, which was in 2003, and that we were really starting to roll, that, you know, we're making a bit of a mark here, and I'm a big part of that. A few of my proudest moments of Download. One in particular was in 2010 when I'd persuaded AC/DC to play at Download. I mean, this band didn't play festivals. I mean, they just didn't. They did their own thing. Huge stadium act right across the world. And I'd come up with an idea of, it's quite an interesting story because I'd gone to some charity event. And I'd come back to the office. It was really late at night, and I'd got nobody booked for the Download Festival. I'd tried loads of bands, I'd got nowhere. And I remember sitting at my desk thinking, like, you know, what am I going to do? I've got no bands. And I'd tried AC/DC in the past, and it had always been a no, always been a no. And then I was thinking about the things. If I was in AC/DC, what would make me want to play this festival? So I kind of turned it on its head, and I was thinking, well, you know, if I was Angus Young, what is it was going to make me play this festival? Obviously, a huge, massive check. That's a given. But it was the 30th anniversary of the very first Monsters of Rock at Donington. It was also the 30th anniversary of the Back in Black album, which was, I think, second biggest selling album of all time. Also, very sadly, the guy who had launched the Monsters of Rock Festival, Maurice Jones, had passed away a few months previously, and I wanted to do something in memory of Maurice, because he'd come up with the idea of the event, and that we were going to call the main stage the Maurice Jones stage. And I knew Maurice was very close with the band, and I'd also put that in my proposal, say, listen, we're going to be doing something in memory of Maurice Jones as well. There's about 5 bullet points that I'd put in. I remember sending the email to the agent. Now, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and the agent's in America. And so I send this email, and I thought, I'm going to follow it up. So I ring up. So, of course, it's 1 o'clock here. Over there, it's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Is Chris there? No, Chris isn't here. I'm like, that's unusual. Chris is like normally always in the office. No, it is what it is. So I start closing down my computer. And then I noticed my BlackBerry started flashing. Anyway, I click it, and it's Chris Dalston, the agent for AC/DC. He goes, I'm in Argentina with AC/DC. I'm sat with the manager. I've just shown him your email. He goes, I like the idea of that. I'm going to go and talk to the band. He goes, I think this could be a goer. And I'm like, oh my God, talk about me just rolling the dice and something clicking. I had no clue that he was going to be out on the road with AC/DC at that time and physically be with the manager at the moment my email came through. So all the stars were aligned, thank goodness. And within about 5-6 days, we'd got the deal done. They'd confirmed and they were ready to do download. And that was such a huge story to go out with when we launched it, that AC/DC were coming back to Donington. They're going to be headlining download. And this was a band that they just didn't play festivals. And I'd managed to hold that record for some time until obviously they decided to do Coachella. But I am proud of the fact that I was the guy that actually was the first one to get them to come back and do festivals after many, many years. There's a number of bands that haven't played the festival that I'd like to see play there. Green Day have not headlined it. Foo Fighters not headlined it. I'd like to see the Reformed Guns N' Roses headline download. Blink-182 haven't headlined it, and there's a lot of like new bands coming through that I'd certainly like to see. They're not ready to headline like right now, but in the next couple of years, whether that's Paramore, Fall Out Boy, Bring Me the Horizon, it'd be great to see some of those younger bands finally coming through and being headliners of the event. I think there's going to be more involvement with the promoter, the agent, the manager, the artist and the record label. Most people would think, well, surely those synergies happen already. Well, they haven't, but they're starting to now. Used to be the promoter and the record label would be like this, and I would be saying to them, we need to be more like this, because what you can do when you're trying to promote your act and sell your records is that's ultimately going to help me sell tickets. And if I'm selling tickets and we're raising the profile of the act and we're making them bigger in the live arena, that's going to help you sell records. And I've certainly seen over the last 3 to 5 years that relationship between the promoter and the label has vastly improved. We've still got ways to go, but we shouldn't be seeing one another as the enemy. We're in the same industry and we've got to keep building bands, and it's the same with the media, artists themselves, the managers, the agencies. We're all partners in the same thing. Most bands, if not all of them, want to be huge. They want to be playing stadiums, they want to be playing arenas, they want to be festival headliners. And the only way that we can do that is making sure that all the parts in the machine are working together. And I'm certainly seeing that starting to happen more now. And I think we'll see that happen even more often in the future. And bands that or artists that want to do more global deals. Luckily at Live Nation we've been doing it for some time, but bands are starting to see the real advantage of doing that, as almost going to a one-stop shop promoter that can put a marketing strategy together for them for the whole world in conjunction with their record label. They then see that there's an opportunity of them really growing and developing at a rate that they're deserved of, and they're just going to one person. If there's issues, it's like we go to this one person because they're taking care of us for the whole world. Again, yes, we're writing the big checks, which is massively important for all the acts, but it's more than that. It is about putting a marketing plan together and a touring strategy together that's going to work for the act long term. And we've been very, very lucky to be working with some big names, whether that's U2, Coldplay, Jay-Z, Madonna, Lady Gaga, but we're also looking at developing some of the younger acts, and we're acting as A&R too, kind of going, well, you know what, it might be worth us starting to put some touring strategies together for a new artist, because we believe in them. It's like, what can we do for them in the early days, again in conjunction with the manager, the label, the agent, of developing that act really, really early, and hopefully bringing them through to being an arena stadium act, and not just in certain territories but across the world. My advice to any developing promoters out there is to, just dig in. It's tough, but if you've got a flair and a desire and a want to, become a local promoter, a national promoter, then just, hang in there. You've got to, you give up a lot when you're being a promoter. You give up a lot when you're in the music business. Full stop. Is your social life gets smashed to pieces. There's no set working hours, but your passion and drive for music is a thing that pulls you through. You want to find that new band. You want to be the person that spots the band first, that helps them grow. And even at a young promoter level, or new promoter level, that's what got you started in the first place. It's like, just hang in there. If you believe in what you do, if you work hard enough, then it will come.